So I was thinking about doing a video or maybe writing a piece, kind of going over the Iran-Israel conflict. And normally I try to keep my video pieces, if they go to the notes, under 5 minutes, because then it can go on notes. Or if I'm going to do a longer piece, I try to do it. I might send it out to subscribers. But I mean, really, there's so many kind of nuances to unpack with this. So I thought, well, let's just do a live and see who joins in, and I'll kind of give my 2 cents on the conflict and what's happening. Because I know for a lot of folks right now, this stuff is really kind of scary. You're hearing like it's going to be World War III, all this other kind of stuff. Um, and you don't really know what's going to go down. And I'm going to say at the jump, I don't know what's going to go down. But I'm going to walk through this and try to make at least an educated guess. So for a little background on me as to why you should even trust what I have to say. So I got my master's in history in American foreign policy in China. I didn't do a lot of Middle East stuff. I did do sort of secondary work on Ukraine because my graduate advisor, he specialized in China, Russia, and Ukraine specifically. So that's how I know a lot of stuff about Ukraine before the conflict kicked off. And when I was in the reserves for the Marines and I went to SOI, I had a staff sergeant, and I was already in high school big into history. I won like awards in the school. I even got like some national awards for it. Like, it was one of those things where I loved history class. And so it was probably the only homework I didn't mind doing. Yeah, my mom took me on the Freedom Trail, I think when I was like 6 or 7 years old, up in Boston. We didn't live there, but we were visiting relatives. And I did the Freedom Trail, did the whole Boston Tea Party, all that stuff. Um, so, but one thing Staff Sergeant Vitale, one of my instructors, said is that why you should study history, especially foreign policy, is one day your country may ask you to go and fight and potentially die or get wounded in a foreign country. Don't you want to know why you're going there and what you're putting your life on the line for? And I took that seriously. So, even before I really got into history as a major in college, I was reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William L. Schreier, just, you know, for casual reading. Um, so, foreign policy was sort of the last thing that I ended up studying. I started out with military history, and then I got excited about the history of ideas and religion. And then my last sort of stop was foreign policy, more so than military history. And so, really, you have to look at this conflict in both what's led up to it and sort of where we're at now, and why the potential for a world war is not as stark. Um, so I'll kind of run through the World War III scenario, right? And why that's not as much of it might still happen, but it's not a guarantee that this is going to expand beyond a regional conflict. So what do you need for a world war, right? Well, one, you have to have in both world wars, you have these um, alliances, diametrically opposed alliances that are rock solid. And that one bad actor is going to go and hit another bad actor, and then that's going to pull everybody into the conflict. And there also has to be a resource determination for a lot of this stuff, right? So, for instance, America didn't get involved in both World War I and World War II right away. The same kind of arguments applied. So World War I, it was considered, okay, this is sort of the colonial powers, the European powers going at it. We're not messing with that. although Woodrow Wilson wanted to get involved in the conflict, it wasn't until the sinking of the Lusitania and a pretext that there were Americans on board, even though the Lusitania, now we know, was transporting munitions and weapons. It was a passenger liner. It wasn't supposed to be, right? But that, like, basically the German U-boat sunk it, and that got us into the war. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's inevitable, Tracy. The thing about Trump is he tweets a lot. He does a lot of stuff on social media. Going to actual war is way different than using the AUMF, the authorization and use of military force, which is mostly just for like bombing and things like that. So, and I'll kind of get to that. So, World War I, World War II, you have these really major alliances, and the U.S. is sort of on the sidelines and comes in late to both conflicts. Japan sort of drew us into fighting them. Germany declared war on us in World War II shortly thereafter. So then we declared war on them, and then we're in World War II. You don't really have that nowadays, and a lot of that's because of Trump, right? So the same factor that lets Israel kind of jump ahead and go ahead and do these preemptive strikes with Iran, we can't just snap our fingers and NATO and everybody just rushes to back us. That's kind of gone. The rest of the world they were already kind of tired of this from the global war on terror. And now, like, you add in this chaos agent of Trump, and nobody's, especially in Europe, is willing to dive into a ground war in Iran. So, especially not when you still have Russia and Ukraine going back and forth at it, because that war is potentially right on their doorstep. Iran might as well be on another planet, and with fuel increasingly, like, as cheap as it is, and with Saudi Arabia and other countries being able to make up the shortfall with, and plus alternative fuel sources becoming, more and more prevalent, you're not as ready to rush into the Middle East for a war for oil like you were, say, 20 years ago. Especially when the United States right now currently produces, I think, the most oil and natural gas in the world. So, yeah, we're already drilling, baby, drilling. I'm not sure if the sanctions were still on Iran, stopping them from, selling their oil. They do it through like basically a third party. Essentially, they'll sell it to China, and China sells it to us or whoever. So not that the sanctions are toothless; they just make it more difficult. But the point is, you don't have these rock solid alliances, where the world's one side and the other, even like you did in the Cold War. The world's way more multinational at this point, with everybody kind of has their own interest, and Europe and the EU and Canada are going their own way. In fact, on July 1st, Canada is taking sovereignty over their own military. And for a lot of Canadians, that's going to be right on time. So they're going to basically be like, nope, we're not automatically joined at the hip with Canada anymore. So there's that. So the framework for a world war currently is not there. Now, we haven't even talked about, we haven't even talked about Russia yet, and Operation Spiderweb that has crippled their nuclear fleet and their strategic bombing fleet for Russia. I mean, by 34%. And Russia might threaten to supply Iran, but they're already struggling to supply their own army in Ukraine. So if Russia tries to back Iran, that's mostly just an empty threat. I mean, They might threaten the nuclear option, but I mean, that's problems for everybody. So, and Iran, while they may threaten to attack US bases and stuff like that, as a country, they're not going to do it. Now, the problem we have to be wary of there is they are a state sponsor of terrorism. So, what's that going to mean for us? I think I think it's more of a problem for Israel than us. I don't know. So the so the but here's where we get to the rub of it. And here's where we get to where the rubber meets the road. Are we going to war, and what does that mean? Well, this is where it starts to get legalistically or legislatively technical. Okay. So, like, so the thing is, right now, the president still is operating under what's called the AUMF. That's the authorization of use of military force. That is meant for it was given to George W. Bush by Congress for the global war on terror. Essentially, what that was is we were going to be operating in so many theaters covertly. They didn't want the president, hence the Department of Defense, to constantly go to Congress and authorize a strike. It was meant to basically cut the red tape. And, but then we got secret covert wars in Yemen. We had, like when you hear about every once in a while, like with the special forces, those special forces soldiers got killed in Niger. That was part of the AUMF. That's part of the special operations features, security operations that are going on all over the world that we never hear about. So now Obama tried to get Congress to rescind that, right? He tried to get Congress to take back the AUMF, and the Republicans didn't do it because, again, they thought their guy could use it. So there's that. Now, a ground war with U.S. troops, with invasion and occupation, that's going to require a declaration of war. That is beyond the scope of the AUMF. So you would have to go to Congress. We would have to declare war on Iran. We would have to, that's when mobilization occurs. That's when, the fleets start heading overseas. And then that's a whole other kettle of fish. So can we bomb military targets with the AUMF? Yes, we can. That does not require an official war declaration. I'm not talking about the legality on the world stage. I'm not talking about the ethics of it. I'm just talking about how this functions. So Trump may threaten to bomb something, and he might bomb some facilities in Iran just to, there it is. We did it, right? But calling up an invasion and an occupation would be a hell of a lot bigger of a deal, Now, why is that? What's the possibility of that? I honestly don't know. But if I had to guess, if I had to put put my finger on it, I'd say it's less likely, not more likely. I'll tell you why. So Trump likes to talk big, and he likes to act like he's a big deal, right? But he's not. He's weak. He doesn't have any convictions. He doesn't have any sort of grit. So he's not going to make decisions that are what he perceives as unpopular for long. This is why he keeps flip-flopping on a lot of things. Where he flip-flop on immigration, or if his crazy will move, and that's like that's the real big part of it, right? That's where it's really, really hard to nail Trump down, because he's nuts. you don't really know what he's going to do. He's an irrational actor. However, there are some consistencies that we can look at. One, he cares about his polling, he cares about his ratings. And people on the far right, just like the left, do not like Israel. On the far right, it's typically more for the anti-Semitism and that old timey, racism, right? They do not want to go to war for the Jewish people. And that's how they're going to see it. And that's how you're already kind of starting to see that on the right with Marjorie Taylor Greene. You're seeing that with Tucker Carlson. You're seeing people that are coming out against this. And the tag that they're getting, so I know Joe Walsh has come out in support of Israel. And he got slammed with the label from the far right people because he's more in that space than I am with being a neocon, which I thought was hilarious. Joe Walsh is not a neocon, not even close. So, and for those of you guys that don't know the difference, the neocons were the ones that got us into the war in the war in Iraq, right? So they were the ones that wanted the war for oil, war for expansion, that a lot of blood and treasure were spilt for that, right? So they like Rand Paul's dad, where part of the genesis with the Tea Party movement was it was that old sort of isolationist bent in American politics. They wanted to pull us out of our overseas commitments, right? So they don't want unconditional support for Israel. They don't want unconditional support for NATO. They don't want us to have overseas bases. That's why the tariffs are kind of popular with these people, even though they're not going to work. They don't want to be in a global society. And that's kind of like we've had that vein in American politics ever since we were founded. Back then they called them in the founding the country, they were called nativists, right? Which is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek sort of insult, them being nativists, because nobody's really, unless you're a Native American, nobody was a native. Everybody's an immigrant. So, so they don't. That's their thing, and that's going to be on the far right. The far left has different reasons for not supporting Israel. Um, the some of it's anti-Semitism, some of it's support for Palestine. Some of it is just, like they don't want wars for expansion, that kind of thing. So both extremes on the political debate sort of line up with this. Now, in the middle and sort of center left, center right, where you are in American politics, it really kind of depends on where you line up with that. Because here's the problem is Israel is similar to, they're going through what we're going through. They have Netanyahu, their leader, who is just corrupt. And he's doing all this it's pretty obvious, to hang on to power. And he's just as incompetent as Trump. And so he's just a little more savvier than Trump. And you have their far right in Israel, that basically their solution to the Palestinian issue is just genocide. Just, either wipe them out or force them off their land and close the borders. You have the same thing over in Israel that you have over here. Same kind of thing. So, and you also have Israelis that are against the war and protesting against it and don't like Netanyahu, the same as we do, right? So it's a very similar thing. So the thing you don't want to do is you can't paint the Israeli people with a broad brush, right? The same way you couldn't do that, you shouldn't do that with Americans. That we wouldn't want other people to do that to us. Unfortunately, their government is going to do what their government's going to do. So what does that mean for us? Well, the thing is, getting in a ground war with Iran is not going to be even close to the same as it was with Iraq and Afghanistan. And even the war hawks in the Pentagon, they know that. Um, with Iraq, we'd already wiped out their military. They hadn't really rebuilt. There was some of that, but not really. You know, Saddam Hussein was really sort of the Baathists, and that party was really just kind of a shell of itself. Um, we'd had sort of an occupying force there ever since the Gulf War. So, really and Afghanistan with the Taliban, they'd been rocked, so they hadn't been able to really recover since the Soviet Afghan war. Um, so us attacking them really was just, we swept them aside, there it was. The problem we got into was the occupation, right? So it's that problem is a whole different kettle of fish, because with Iraq and Afghanistan, you had an insurgency where that's basically where the fighting is done. There's no symmetrical warfare, but you know, and you're kind of just you're basically, as you're in cities or you're patrolling or whatever, you're kind of a target. It's the same thing that went on in Vietnam, you know. So, um, do I think we're going to go into Iran with that, especially with Pete Hegseth as our sec dev? No. Like, we might, because these people again are rock stupid and they don't understand really what they're getting into. But my money would be on Trump is looking for an easy way out. What is he looking for? Um, and that would be, so we might bomb something, or we might let Israel bomb something. Um, and then he'll chase something else in a week or two. Because the other thing too is Ch- Russia really needs Iran right now. They really need Iran for their oil. And Trump basically, like they like Trump basically bent over and, you know, spouted Kremlin talking points at the G7. So right now he's trying to figure out, how do I get out of this with you know, how do I get out of like attacking something Russia wants, which is Iran? And let's be honest, part of all this stuff from the far right, these politicians that are suddenly, we can't go to war for Israel. We can't do this. We can't do that. Da, 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 da. There's a lot of Russian money on the Republican side of the fence. A lot. And Russia does not want us to like mess with Iran right now. They can't afford to. Once with these sanctions, that pretty much ends any kind of cheap oil. And China's not going to keep supporting them forever. And in fact, I think they've cut back on munitions. And North Korea can't, they're not even close to being able to pick up the slack that China can pick up. So I think Trump's going to use this as a distraction for sure. But the problems he's getting ready to have are going to be, they're going to take effect in, it's going to take a heck of a lot, a heck of a lot longer time. I mean, we're talking like it's really going to be the tariffs and the stuff that's happening at home, especially if they pass this big, beautiful bill, which is just going to exacerbate problems, and it's just going to exacerbate the debt, So, I mean, now, does that mean that I'm saying for certain that we're not going to war? Nobody can say that. You know, nobody can say that. And I have no idea. But is it likely? I don't think so. Yeah. If I had to think about it, or if I had, and for the reasons I've stated, I don't think so. Um, Trying to get in a war with Iran, which would have been a tough sell, even with the coalition of the willing back in '03 when we invaded Iraq. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I honestly, I mean, I don't know. You know, I don't, technologically speaking, um, I don't know where our military is right now. It's tough to grasp on. Our equipment's not where it needs to be because we spent more money on, contractors and BS. Um, we've got way too many commitments overseas for the money we're spending. Our recruitment quota is absolutely down. And with, you know, the purging of top command and officer staff that Trump has done, you know, I mean, because there were women or there were people of color. I mean, even that thing Tommy Tuberville did for, it was like 6 months to stick it to Biden where he held up all those promotions. A lot of people got out at that point and said, okay, I'll just go on and do something else. So we already have a shortage in our general staff and officer corps. And we don't have, so we're not, we're not ready to take on, like, we're not ready to take on a ground war of that magnitude. We're not. The army, the armed forces that we had to take on a fight against the Soviet Union are, that got chewed up during the global war on terror. And while we still have the nuclear triad where we can launch bombs from, a submarine or, airplanes or, and ground silos, that doesn't really matter, you know. I mean, you can nuke a city, but okay, Now if they start doing that, I mean, it's just like, you know, like, yeah. I'll say this, like, I know you guys have been going back and forth on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Look, this is me having studied conflict, you know, seen people that I was friends with. I never deployed overseas, but I had friends that went over. Um, war conflict. It's, to paraphrase to General William Sherman. It's all hell, and you can't refine it. It's just bad. Innocent people will get hurt. There's no way around it. You know, the Palestinians are suffering in Gaza. It's and you have Israelis that hate those people, and you have Israelis that are, their heart is breaking for Palestinians they know and care about. And it's the same way on the other side of the fence. You have Palestinians, Hamas fighters that they hate Israel and they would want to kill every Jewish person they can get their hands on. And then there's other ones that just want the conflict to end. You know, I think I think Netanyahu is a monster. I think that he absolutely needs to be removed from office, and he has and should be tried. He should be tried in The Hague. You know, does that mean I want Israel wiped off the map? No, 100% not. You know, they have a right to exist, as do the Palestinians. You know, and again, had we not gotten caught up in all this radical rhetoric of Genocide Joe and all this other crap, and somehow people got convinced Trump was a man of peace. Maybe we have Kamala Harris in there, and maybe we start moving towards a two-state solution. I mean, I honestly don't. I don't know what the right answer is for that. That's why I don't talk about it a lot. Besides it being a very kind of touchy and controversial subject, but there's no easy answer for that. I mean, there just isn't. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be. We shouldn't try to move towards some kind of imperfect solution, even if it's hard, even if it's extremely hard. Because Palestinians and Israelis deserve to live in some measure of they deserve to live in peace. So do the Iranians, and it's a volatile area of the world, and it's always scary when things over there start popping off, especially since we always, we're always messing around in that area of the world, right? And it's terrifying, right? Because you think, how is this going to spread to a wider conflict? I don't know. It could cut it can cut in so many different ways. I do know that anytime you start thinking like, oh, this is like the last war, or it's going to be like this, and it's going to play like 10, nah, most of the time you're wrong. Like it cuts the way it cuts right now. So, I mean, this thing could end in a week with a bunch of angry fist shaking for both sides, and then it just kind of peters out, or it could escalate. Either way, you're gonna have bomb missiles dropping in Tehran. You're gonna have them dropping in. You're gonna have them dropping in Tel Aviv. And that's gonna mean innocent civilians are going to die. You know, and that's the problem. You know, so it's. I studied a lot of wars of occupation, and I'm here to tell you, wars of occupation do not change cultures for the better. We just got out of they do not make them friendly towards you. They just don't. You know, I mean, you look at what we did to the Native Americans. You look at, um, you look at 20. We had a generational occupation in Afghanistan, and it ended up with the Taliban still in charge. Now you could say like, "Oh, it's Trump, it's this, it's that, blah blah." But I mean, you had George W. Bush, Barack Obama, both had 2 terms. Trump, and you had like, and then Biden got the tail end of it, and basically was just like, "Okay, it's only my term. Like, let's just get out of here. We're done." You know, and I mean that's it. Is like at some point you got to go home. You know, like I think the only occupation that we've ever had that actually went somewhat smoothly was the occupation of Japan after World War II. And that's simply because just the culture of the Japanese people, and the fact that MacArthur actually worked with the emperor of Japan. And so it was more or less peaceful. If you read about Operation Werewolf and all the stuff that was going on in Germany, they were still, they still had Nazis running around, attacking the German government and U.S. troops until it went into the 50s, into the early 50s. That's the thing with like history books. When you have a survey of war, it always feels like this real clinical thing. Like it's just suddenly what war's over. No one else died. It's like, no, that's not how that works. I mean, heck, the KKK in this country was still, you know, that it was a basically just a guerrilla apparatus in the South. after war, after the Civil War. You know, it's like so. I like the the thing that's gonna I think that's gonna screw us, not in terms of war, but all these, and this is why I constantly sort of hype on we got to hold the institutions and the organizations and the enablers for Trump, because we're going to have a very hard situation come up that is going to require very serious and competent people. That's what we elect our leaders for, is when those situations arise, whether it's war, a natural disaster, economic calamity, you name it, or, pandemic, something, that the adults are in charge and that they can handle it. The problem is it's not so much this one, and this is why we're all kind of bracing for it, is what's the thing that Trump is going to screw up? And clearly he's in cognitive decline. The guy was already a freaking idiot and a narcissist and all these other horrible things. And now it's just even worse. And we have a media that's not pressing on that, all gas, no brakes, like they did with Joe Biden, and it is doing all of us a disservice. So, and yeah, I mean, and that's why I'm not going to say, oh yeah, we're definitely not going to war with Iran. No, I think it's less likely than more likely. But if I had to put a number on it, I'm thinking 70 to 30%, and that 30% is still a viable 30%, because he could just decide, oh yeah, yeah. We need to send in the 82nd Airborne. It needs to be like this movie I just saw on Turner Classic Television. And so, yeah, they'll go in and they'll just get them. They're gonna get the Ayatollah, and then there you go. Like, so that's kind of what I'm afraid of. And the problem is, then you don't have a Secretary of Defense or people that are going to say, sir, that's probably not a great idea. Like, we don't have Esper in there. We've got freaking Hegseth, who, boy, so, but we'll see, you know, um, but the conditions there, they're not there like they were for a world war, you know. I don't see, I mean, honestly, I see China just letting us like go on our merry way, because everything we're doing to screw ourselves, China's benefiting. Almost certainly. All these tariffs, they're benefiting. So is the EU. Everybody's benefiting but us right now. So, yeah, I mean, they're probably sitting back like, wow. Okay. You know, like we get to increase our sphere of influence just from tariffs. Fantastic. You know. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I hope some of this some of this explanation has helped you kind of put it in context. It's scary, but it's not, it's scary because we don't know, like, we don't have a stable commander in chief. But we have a weak commander in chief, so like, I think that's going to his weakness always wins out in one way or another. And the thing is, man, going to war is hard, especially when your country isn't ready for it, you know? And a lead up to something like that, I would be surprised if they could actually get people over there, because that's the other thing too. I mean, if you're going to stage ground troops, there are going to be countries that we have to, station them in. You can't just like, hey, let's load up C-130 and go. I mean, and go straight to Israel. It's like, no, you got to have logistics. You got to have all this stuff. I don't know if other countries are gonna be so willing to go for that. Bahrain might, you know, but I don't know, especially when what he's doing well, how he's done that, I don't know. So, how he's done with the Middle East and, God, who was the you know, Qatar. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, with the whole plane and everything else. Uh, how do we repair relations? You can do that rather and it depends on the administration. The US will always have a lot of innate advantages. Like, so we have massive country, big population, a lot of resources. Um, so like if the axis gets back to where it's more even, where you have rich and everyone else instead of rich and everyone else, the United States is definitely going to be an influence on world affairs. What's going to change, I think, is we're no longer going to be a superpower. The world's not going to dance to our tune. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad idea or a bad thing, um, because it's just change. And we've done some good things running the world, and we've done some really bad things too, like every country in history. Um, so, but I don't see necessarily a world, like being more multinational with no superpowers. I think that's a better thing. You know, we don't, you know, we don't necessarily need to be the world's police. And maybe if we get out of that mindset, you know, we can actually stop having three ways to obliterate the Soviet Union with nuclear bombs. I don't say that jokingly. We still do that. We have the nuclear triad. And the nuclear triad literally was the reason it came about during the Cold War is, hey, if Russia's nuclear missiles take out one type of our our counter strike capabilities, we have three ways, you know, like to take that, to basically bomb the Soviet Union. We still have three ways to bomb the Soviet Union. It's ridiculous. So, yeah, Barney Frank from Massachusetts, a former congressional rep, basically said, "Hey, I'm fine with still two. Can we just get rid of one? Can we just not fund one? Let's still have two. Just get rid of one." Okay. How do we get them to take us seriously after this? It just you do it with diplomacy, you know, and so like where we kind of the thing that you're going to see is the built-in advantages people got from being Americans, those are gonna go. Um, you're not automatically just like as a country get deferred to. It's not gonna be America's way. We're gonna actually have to be diplomatic. Um, it's not just gonna be like, well, this is what America wants, and other countries are like, well, okay, you know, that's not gonna happen. It's gonna be what Germany needs, what their people want, what France wants, what the EU wants, what Canada wants. So we're going to go back to a time before World War II where, we have to be diplomatic, you know? Um, it's not going to happen all at once. It's going to change things, and we really have to be to where we can offer something. Um, you know, so it's like, that's going to be tough for us is because we've enjoyed this. I haven't, it's almost twice my lifetime, you know, of how long America's kind of called the shots in the free world, over 80 years. And so, um, that's not something that we're not going back to that. Like that almost kind of that kind of took a hit, but big hit. It it started taking hits when the global war on terror started cranking along. Um, and then Obama kind of kept that going, you know, and then Trump got into office and it was like, whoa, okay, let's see if America gets through this. And Biden sort of pulled it back and kind of held it together with duct tape and baling twine. Once we elected Trump for the second time and he started doing his, that was it. The rest of the world's like, no, time to think of a new way. And Canada was the first one to take that step out. Like, that's the thing. When Carney says Canada is going to lead the free world, they mean it. That's just not talk. They mean it, you know? And they're like, let me rephrase. They didn't say lead. They said they're going to be a leader among the free world. And they are. They are basically where we were right before World War II. Lots of natural resources, access to the Arctic, which is going to be where the next resource rush occurs. Lots of potential for expansion and growth, for manufacturing to compete. So China, like Canada is definitely going to, they've got the potential there. Now, does that mean it's going to happen? A lot can happen. There's a lot between there and that. But the thing about it is like for national will, which is a thing, they've got it. The Canadians, they have it. We don't. There's a lot of things that we got to do to really, our economy is too lopsided. We have way too much money going up to the rich who are not doing really anything with it. And so you don't have this robust, like the things that made us attractive. And this is going to be the hard thing. We've exposed that sort of ugly kind of underbelly with us, the racism, the hate, the bigotry, the, all that stuff, which has always been there. Right. But PR post World War II in some ways covered a lot of that up. And a lot of that had to do with our economy, so, I mean, that's going to be tough to get back. That's going to be because Trump, this is the thing that's going to hurt us a lot is they're doing their damnedest to dissuade the best and brightest from coming over here. Research is going to Europe. Europe has the EU has set aside billions of dollars to attract top flight scientists and researchers. Quality of life there is better than ours. You can actually make good money and live a good life as a research lecturer. I mean, you name it. And, if these other countries are smart, I mean, I know the Netherlands is struggling with, other people coming over and, getting an education, but it's really kind of a smart play because if they could fund that, then you're taking the best, instead of coming to America, the best and brightest in the world, they're going to start going to the EU. They're going to start going to Canada. They're going to start going to other places. And so you're going to lose entrepreneurship. You're going to lose that innovation. You're going to lose artistic and intellectual creativity. These are things that are going to start slipping in America. That's kind of how empires fall. It's a slow decline. In the history books, you read it as oh, it just happens all at once. It's no. And that's usually just authors, historians pick a date and they say, oh, it's this. And it's well, the seeds for that were sown a long time ago. And, we've always wrestled in our country with a provincialism, a sort of isolationist, nativist. We've always had that clash, and we had leaders in Washington after World War II. It used to be they called it the liberal consensus. Heather Cox Richardson has written about it, where there was a consensus on what values we hold, uh, and even then back then we struggled with Jim Crow in the South, uh, oppression of Native Americans, women, you name it. So I mean, like this isn't anything new for America. We've gone through this of these sways back and forth between these reactionary forces. You know, you're welcome, Anthony. No problem. But like, we're going like this is where we're at right now. You know, so the good news is, like just like it's always been, nothing has changed. Where we have a chance to push for the country we want to live in. It's just we got to get more people to do it, and we got to keep doing it. Democracy is a lifelong commitment. It's lifelong. It's not something you're like, hey, let's hire someone to do it and they can worry about it. It's like, nope, you're going to have to put in the time and you're going to have to put in the effort. And a lot more people are doing that. And Trump might be that reminder for our generation, or what's left of it, like this epoch, I should say, for multi generations, where it's like, no, man, like we got to freaking hold these politicians under our thumb, you know? So, but yeah, like that. So I just wanted to give you guys, as I was thinking about it, like, there's too much here to condense into one short video. The best we can do on the Iran thing is wait and see. And, hopefully like cooler heads prevail, and see where this goes, because I think Trump's going to like the Trump administration is going to have a lot on their plate coming up very, very soon. A lot of bad stuff, a lot of self-inflicted wounds, a lot of chickens coming home to roost. So, now they may try to do a war to like distract. They might try to do that, but it's not a layup. It is not, it's not the same, even close to what Iraq and Afghanistan were. It's a whole other level of intensity. Yeah, it's closer to Russia, Ukraine, that kind of level of war. So, anyway, that's all I got for you. Keep the faith, defend democracy. I'll see you later.